So you just made it through a successful interview and you want to know if you got the job like yesterday. You felt confident, you asked the right questions, and you feel like you really hit it off with the hiring manager. Plus, you already sent them a carefully crafted thank you email the next day. So you're one step closer to the job of your dreams, but now it's a waiting game. What can you do? And we should mention it really is a wait. Research shows that it takes on average about 38 days to get through the interview and hiring process. So here's the secret. There's one component that can help you stand out among other candidates, and that's the follow-up email. Plus, a follow-up email is a great opportunity to fill in any gaps that you might have learned after your interview. So things like, here's why I'm still a really good fit for the role, or here's what I saw in the news recently and how I also have experience for that. Anything that maybe you left unclear in the interview, you can clear up all in this follow-up email. So let's get into it. Here's how to write the perfect job interview follow-up email.
When to send the post-interview follow-up email. You've already done your due diligence by sending the initial thank you note within 24 hours of your first interview, but you haven't heard back in a couple of weeks. It's perfectly fine to send a friendly follow-up note to let your interviewers know you are still interested and to see where they are in the hiring process. Just don't jump the gun. Send a follow-up only if it's been more than a week since your interview. Pro tip, ask all of the timeline questions ASAP. The quote, when question is easier once you have an understanding of what the hiring process looks like. The next time you're entering a job interview process, ask the recruiter or hiring manager for additional information about the timeline. Here are some additional questions to ask about the timeline. When are you looking to fill this position? What should I expect from the interview process? This is a great question to ask during a phone interview as well. Is there an appropriate time that I might follow up on this position if I don't hear by, quote, date? Who is the best contact for following up with any additional questions? For example, if you know they plan on hiring for this role the first week of February and it's the last week of January, you can address this by saying something like, you mentioned the goal of filling name of job opening by February 1st, so I wanted to follow up to see if that had been filled yet. Additionally, if your interviewer mentioned they aren't contacting candidates for second interviews till March 1st and it's the end of January, then please hold tight. We will address how to send a, quote, top of mind email later on. How to prep for the follow-up during the interview. You can never be too prepared. At the end of an interview, the employer almost always asks, what questions do you have for me? This is your time to shine. If you come prepared with the right questions, you can easily determine if the company is the right fit for you and scope out any missing pieces you'd like to discover. But you'll also ensure you have some material for a stellar follow-up. Here are some helpful questions that will pay dividends down the line. What do you think is the biggest challenge the company will face within the next 6 months or 1 to 5 years? What do you hope the person who fills this position accomplishes in her first 30, 60, or 90 days? What does success look like in this role? What critical pain points does this role help with? Make sure to listen carefully to their answers. When you write your follow-up, reference those goals and mention a couple of ideas you've come up with during the waiting period. When to write a follow-up email after an interview. As we mentioned earlier, you will want to send a post-interview thank you note within 24 hours of your interview. We recommend you send the post-interview thank you via email and personalize it as much as you can by addressing the names of the people who interviewed you, and spell their names correctly, please, pointing out what you like about the company, and reiterating why you would make a great addition to the team. True story, we had a hiring manager tell us she never moved forward with a candidate until she received a thank you email. So yes, it's very important to send one and be timely about it. And just in case you needed more evidence, this report shows that 91% of hiring managers prefer a thank you note, and yet less than half of people actually send one. Here's a quick example of what to say in your post-interview thank you email. Sample subject lines for post-interview thank you email. Thank you, comma, interviewer's name, job title, and name. Thank you from name, job title, interview candidate. Thank you for the opportunity, job title, name. Sample post-interview thank you email. Email subject line, thank you from name, job title, interview candidate. Dear name, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about the position or job title you're applying for today. I really enjoyed learning more about include something they shared, such as strategy or product goals, audience, clients, insights, upcoming challenges, company culture, values, industry insights, really anything specifically that they shared. The information you provided really solidified my interest in this role, and I feel confident that I could make a valuable contribution with my skills and experience, such as bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. We also specifically discuss an issue discussed during the interview, and I wanted to follow up on that. In my last role as blank your current or most recent position, I addressed something similar by doing provide examples or explanation of how you would tackle a similar issue or challenge and back up that data. Lastly, I mentioned sending you some examples of project, example, client work, etc. that you mentioned, which are attached. Please feel free to contact me if you find you need any more information. I look forward to any next steps or timing they mention. If nothing mentioned, you can just write, I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, name, contact information. Now, assuming you sent a thank you email and assuming the interviewer didn't say anything specific about their timeline, when do you send a first follow-up email? We recommend waiting about 3 weeks. The logic behind this is that you sent an immediate thank you email, and now we want to give the company some space and time to interview other candidates, review their notes, organize next steps, etc. Sometimes a decision maker might be out of the office, and there are other moving parts, so give them enough space to work through all of that, but not so much space that they forget about you. Sample subject lines for a follow-up email after an interview. Checking in, job title, interview candidate, your name. Next steps for job title, your name. Following up on job title, interview, your name. How to write the follow-up email. When composing your follow-up note because you haven't heard anything after your thank you note, remember that it's not an essay. Make it short and to the point. Recruiters and hiring managers might have a very busy schedule, especially when they are looking to hire for multiple open roles. Nobody is a stranger to an overwhelming inbox, and you'll likely be a little more focused on this particular email than the hiring manager. That doesn't necessarily mean they aren't interested. That's why we like to think of this email as the, quote, top of mind email. We want to stay top of mind for the recruiters, so they want to invite you back for a second interview. Now's the time you bring up any challenges the interviewer mentioned and suggest some solutions that you've thought about. This will show that you went the extra mile to do the research on how the company might improve. Here's a quick checklist for how to follow up after an interview. Include the job title and your name in the subject line. Personalize the email and address the person by name. Express your gratitude for the interview. Reinforce your interest in the role. Refer to anything specific about the company and how your skills, experience, etc. can add value. Make this follow-up timely by mentioning any recent news, press releases, or solutions you've thought about since your first interview. Ask for any clarity about the interview process timeline. Sample job interview follow-up email. Email subject line, following up on job title, interview, your name. Dear name, thank you again for the opportunity to interview for job title you're applying for on date. During our initial conversation, you mentioned the hiring timeline was pretty flexible, so I wanted to check in on the status since I'm still very interested in the role. Additionally, I saw that the company recently mentioned something recent in the news or press release for the company or industry, and immediately thought of your team because during our interview, you mentioned include a challenge, change, or important detail they mentioned during the interview. I really like your approach to mention specific detail about the company. And I would love the opportunity to continue discussing how my skills can address your needs in the interview process. Please let me know if you have an update and if there's any additional details I could provide you with to facilitate the hiring process. Best regards, name, contact information. Our timeline for sending, quote, top of mind emails. Send your thank you email 24 hours after your first interview. Assuming there was no mention of the interview timeline and you don't get a response from your thank you email, send a top of mind email 3 weeks later. Assuming you don't get a response from that top of mind email after waiting another 3 weeks, send one final top of mind email. If it's been 6 weeks since your first interview and you haven't heard anything from the company, move on. A toxic company culture isn't worth it. How to write a follow-up email after a phone interview. Phone interviews are a common part of the interview process for a variety of reasons. They save you time, allow you to interview non-local candidates, etc. And you might be wondering if your email follow-up for a phone interview should follow different rules. The answer is, it depends. Here's a simple explanation. If you had a phone interview after first submitting your application, follow the previous rules. If you had a phone interview because the recruiter or hiring manager reached out to you directly during the sourcing process, follow our following advice. Many times recruiters will go out looking for candidates, this is also known as sourcing a candidate, on job sites like LinkedIn. If you're a fit, they will reach out to you about a job posting and set up a phone interview. That means you didn't formally apply online for the job with a resume, etc. After you have this initial phone call, it's critical that you engage the recruiter and reiterate your interests. With this hiring strategy, the recruiter might interview 10 people on the same day, and they will want to move forward with the people who are genuinely interested in the role. Show your interest and engage the recruiter by sending a follow-up email within 24 hours of your phone interview. Here's a quick checklist to help you know what to include in your follow-up. Include the job title and your name in the subject line. Personalize the email and address the person by name. Express your appreciation for the interview. Express your interest in the role and get specific. What parts of the job interest you and why? Reiterate why your experience is a good match for the role. Include your resume and/or cover letter in the email. Sample follow-up email after phone interview. Email subject line: thank you, your name, job title, interview candidate. Dear name, thank you for taking the time to interview me for the quote job title role. It was great to learn more about company and the details of the role. I was most excited to learn about include the specific details and why they were exciting for you. It was also great to learn that the company and I are both aligned on connect the dots between what the company is looking for and your experience. I have attached a copy of my resume and cover letter. Please let me know if there are any additional details I can provide you. I look forward to hearing from you and continuing the interview process. Best regards, name, contact information. We also want to address what you should send if you're not interested in the job after your phone interview. While you might be tempted to just ghost the recruiter and company, please don't. You don't want to burn bridges, and you never know when the recruiter or company will have an opportunity you are interested in. Send an email to thank the recruiter for their time and consideration. Next, politely explain why the job isn't a good fit for you and sign off by saying you'd like to stay in touch for future opportunities. How to write a follow-up email after a second interview. It's very common for the interview process in today's job market to include more than one interview. And guess what? A second job interview includes a second email follow-up. The difference between your first interview and your second interview is in the details. After the second interview, you're learning more specifics about the job, company, team, and even the interviewer. Your answers are probably turning into deeper discussions, like the plans you would take to fix a challenge, examples of how you've managed projects in the past, etc. And you're probably having second round interviews with multiple people, so that means each person will need their own unique follow-up email with details. Here's another checklist to help you. Include the job title and your name in the subject line. Personalize the email and address the person by name. Express your appreciation for the interview. Show, not just tell, your ongoing interest in the role the more you learn about the company. Provide specific details from your conversation and connect them to your experience. Sample second follow-up email after a second interview. Email subject line: great connecting with you. Your name, job title, interview candidate. Dear name, thank you for the opportunity to interview for the job title role for the second time. Our discussions further solidified my interest in working with you and the team. I really enjoyed learning more about mention something specific and recognize that one of your biggest challenges is mention something that is a challenge, pain point, etc. As a follow-up to that discussion, I wanted to share some ideas, solutions, recent studies, etc. to help address this. I described them briefly in the bullet point below, attached presentation, attached outline, whatever it is that you want to attach potentially. Let me know what you think, and I hope to have the chance to discuss them with you later. Best regards, name, contact information. How to write a follow-up email after a final interview. We know it can feel nerve-wracking to go in for that final round interview. The pressure is on you to seal the deal and leave with a job offer. However, there's a good chance that you'll conclude your interview without a final decision being made yet. Very few final interviews include the job offer. But the good news is that your final follow-up email is one more opportunity to secure one. Again, you want to send a follow-up email to each person you interviewed with and personalize the email based on the things you said in your conversation. The difference between earlier interview rounds and now is that you can let them know that you want the job offer and remind them why you are the right person for the job. Sample follow-up email after a final interview. Email subject line: thanks, interviewer name, your name, job title, interview candidate. Dear name, thank you again for taking the time to interview me throughout this process. Over the last, quote, number of interviews, I've learned so much about the role and company. A few things that have stood out to me. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. Specifically, I really align with the company and team's values around include specific detail, and I would welcome the opportunity to have my skills benefit this company. Here are just a few of the reasons why I'm the right fit for this role and how I could add value to the organization. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions, and I look forward to hopefully hearing from you soon. Best regards, name, contact information. How to write a follow-up email when you don't get a response. It can feel strange to find yourself in this scenario when you've interviewed for a job, sent a follow-up email, and then weeks go by and you've heard nothing. Getting professionally ghosted hurts and sends you down a negative self-talk spiral. We know you so badly want some answers, and just to directly ask someone, why aren't you responding to me? The goal here is to get a response, but not come across impatient, rude, or annoying. In other words, it's a good idea to send a follow-up email when you don't get a response, but only if you do it the right way, polite and professional. What do you send in a job interview follow-up email after no response? You'll want to send a follow-up email after the offer deadline or interview timeline has passed. For example, they told you the offers would be sent on June 1st and it's June 2nd, or they plan to make an offer by the end of January and it's mid-February. You can also send an email follow-up earlier if you receive another offer. If you know you want to accept the other offer for company B, you can notify company A to let them know you're accepting a new offer and thank them for the opportunity to interview. If you have an offer from company B, but you would rather work at company A, you can use your offer to try to speed up the process. If a company is interested in you and they find out that you have another offer, they will most likely speed up the interview process. Checklist: how to follow up after no response. Include the job title and your name in the subject line. Personalize the email and address the person by name. Politely remind them of the timeline. Express your ongoing interests. Ask about next steps or expectations. Sample follow-up email after no response. Email subject line: checking in, your name, job title, interview candidate. Dear name, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to check in on the interview status of job title role. During our last interview, you mentioned that you'd be making a final decision by the established timeline. Please let me know if there's any update to share and or additional details I can provide you with to facilitate the hiring process. I'm still very interested in the position and I look forward to hearing from you. Best regards, name, contact information. Follow-up email subject lines to try. Checking in, job title. Inquiry about hiring status. Following up regarding job title. Checking in about job interview. Name, job title, interview candidate. Additional email follow-up tips. Pro tip: reply on your original email thread. Is it possible that your post-interview thank you email hit the spam folder? To protect against that happening, send your thank you email and follow-up email on the original thread you used to set up your first interview. Not only will this ensure that you're not hitting spam, but it will likely also give the recruiter access to your original job application, resume, and cover letter, which were attached in the previous emails on the same thread. Here's your checklist for what to include in your follow-up note after the interview. Expression of appreciation for the original interview with the date included. Mention of the specific job role along with your experience as discussed in the interview. An idea or anecdote that shows you've been actively thinking about problem solving in your hopeful future role. Another thank you plus your best regards. The post-interview follow-up email template. Okay, you've been patient enough. Here's the email sample you may send after your initial thank you note. Make sure you check that the names are spelled correctly and that your email is free of typo. Hello, interviewer's name. It was great meeting you, date of interview. Thank you very much for giving me the exciting opportunity to interview for job title position and for giving me so much valuable insight into the role. The more I learn about company name, the more enthusiasm I experienced knowing I could be part of such a dynamic team. After our discussion, I believe my experience in accomplishments and qualifications would render me a great fit at company. Our discussion about discussion points sparked an idea that I could really add value to the company. Insert unique suggestion. Thanks again, sincerely, your first and last name. Writing a simple note shows that you are invested in the company and employers will greatly appreciate that you took the time to follow up. There are many effective ways to follow up after an interview. If you do enough research and follow up throughout the interview process, you'll better your chances of landing the job. Good luck.